What's going on, everyone? Neil here, and today I'm going to take you through a how to play of Sagrada. Sagrada is a 1 to 4 player game designed by Adrian Adamescu and Daryl Andrews and published by Floodgate Games. In Sagrada, you'll be competing against your fellow artists to create the most beautiful stained glass window. Your glass pieces are represented by 6-sided dice. Each round, players will take turns drafting and placing dice in their own window. After 10 rounds, players will score points based on public and private objectives, and the player with the most points will be declared the winner. So, without further ado, let's dive into the setup. Starting with the player setup, first shuffle the private objective cards and give one to each player face down. Private objective cards are the cards with the gray die on the back, whereas public objective cards have a colored die. Private objectives are kept secret from the other players and depict a color in which you will score points off of at the end of the game based on the values showing of that particular color in your window. In this case, one player will score points based off of the values showing of the yellow dice in their window, and one based off of the purple dice showing in their window. Next, give each player 2 random window patterns and a window frame player board. The window patterns are double-sided, and each player will choose only one pattern to keep. At the bottom of the window, you'll find the name of it, which has no relevance to any gameplay mechanics. However, you'll also find pips in the bottom left corner. These indicate the level of difficulty for that window pattern, with 3 being the easiest and 6 being the hardest. Also, be aware of the restrictions on a window pattern. Restrictions indicate that a specific color or value must be placed in that space. There are tools that allow you to disregard that, but we will speak to that later. In this game, for the purple player, I will choose this window pattern, and for the green player, I will choose this window pattern. The other 2 can be discarded and returned to the box. Give players a number of favor tokens equal to the number of pips that are on their window pattern. I'll explain later what these favor tokens are used for, but in this case, for this window pattern, I would get 5, and for this, I would get 4. You can now slide your window pattern into the bottom of your player board, ensuring that everything lines up appropriately. And finally, for player setup, take the round track and place it near the center of the table, and place the score markers that match the color of each player board next to the track. These will be used during the Endgame Scoring. Onto the game setup. Shuffle the tools cards and select 3 randomly and place them face up in the play area. Everyone should read each tool card to understand what will be available to them throughout the game. Now, shuffle all public objective cards and draw 3 randomly and place them face up in the play area. These will explain to you how to score points throughout the game. For example, you'll see here that at the end of the game, we'll score 5 points for each row with no repeated values, 5 points for each column with no repeated colors, and 2 points for every 1 and 2 values anywhere on your window. These are just a few possible ways to score points. Next, you can go ahead and place all 90 dice in the dice bag. And finally, randomly select one player to be the start player and give them the dice bag. All remaining objectives, tools, and window cards that are not being used for this game can go back into the box. There you go. Setup is complete, so let's dive into what a turn looks like. Each game of Sagrada lasts 10 rounds as shown by the round track. Each round, the start player will draw dice from the dice bag at random and then rolls them. The number of dice drawn from the bag is 2 per player plus 1. So in the case of this two-player game, we're going to go ahead and draw 5. Now, beginning with the start player, and then going clockwise around the table, each player may perform each of the following actions in any order. You can select and place one die in your window, and or use a tool. So, let's talk about selecting and placing dice. When placing a dice on the window, if it's the first die, each player must place their die on an edge or a corner. After the first die is placed, every other die must be placed adjacent to any previously placed die, touching diagonally or orthogonally. The die must match the color or value restriction of the space, while white spaces have no restrictions. Dice may never be placed orthogonally adjacent to a die of the same color or the same value. Lastly, players may choose not to draft a die during their turn. This likely happens towards the end of the game when you can only have certain dice in specific areas, and the dice rolled in the drafting pool are not of the dice that you require. So, now that we know all about selecting and placing dice, once the first player has done so, it then moves on to the next player until all players have gone. So I'm going to go ahead and take this 3 for the start player and place it in this top corner, ensuring to meet all placement restrictions. As for the second player, they're going to go ahead and take this red 2 and place it here along the edge. Once each player has taken a turn selecting and placing one die, the round then continues, but in reverse order, starting with the player who just took the last turn. So, ensuring to take into account all placement rules, the second player is going to go ahead and take this 3 and place it in this corner. And the first will take the 2 and place it along this edge right there. Once the start player takes their second turn, you then proceed to the end of the round. During the end of the round, all remaining dice are placed on the round track, covering the number for the round that was just played. If multiple dice remain, these do not cover additional number spaces. The dice bag is then passed clockwise to the next player, and they are now considered the start player and begin a new round. As part of your turn, I also mentioned using tool cards. On their turn, players may spend favor tokens to gain a special ability from one tool card. When you do so, place a favor token on the tool. However, if there's already a favor token on that tool card and you wish to use it, then you must place 2 on that tool card instead of 1. Once paid for, you can go ahead and use the ability listed on the tool. So for instance, I use the Flux brush, and that states, after drafting, re-roll the drafted die. If it cannot be placed, return it to the draft pool. So I really want this purple dice, so I'm going to take it and re-roll it, and then if I can place it, I will do so. If not, you can return it to the draft pool. Some tool cards that you'll see are the Flux brush, which we just talked about. You'll also see the grinding stone, which states, after drafting, flip the die to its opposite side. So a 6 to a 1, a 5 to a 2, or a 4 to a 3. And lastly, for this game, we have the tap wheel, which states, move up to 2 dice of the same color that match the color of the die on the round track. You must obey all placement restrictions. So what that means is that right now the color of the die on the round track is blue. So if we were to use that card, we could move up to 2 blue dice on our window to another location, obeying all placement restrictions. In total, there are 12 tool cards, and players should read them before the start of play so they fully understand the abilities available to them. And that's it. Players will take turns in a clockwise and reverse clockwise fashion, drafting and placing dice until the end of the 10th round. Once the first player takes their second turn on the 10th round, you can then proceed to the end game scoring. Once the game has ended and you proceed to the end game scoring, clear the round track of all dice and flip the score track over. Use each player's score marker to track their score position on the score track, flipping it over when they exceed 50 points. Each player tallies their victory point total, gaining points from the following. Each public objective. So, starting with row shade variety, the purple player has scored 0 points. The green player, however, has scored 5 points for their first row. Moving on to column color variety, the purple player has scored 10 points, 5 for this column and 5 for this column. The green player has also scored 10 points, 5 for this column and 5 for this column. And finally, light shades. The purple player has scored 6 points because they have 4 ones. However, they only have 3 twos to match with them, so they score 2 points per pair. The green player also scores 6 points for having 3 ones as well as 3 twos. After scoring public objectives, you can go ahead and move on to the private objectives. So for the purple player, they score points for the values of all of their yellow dice combined. So in the case of the purple player, they've scored 15 additional points for all of their yellow dice. And for the green player, they were scoring based off of purple dice. And they scored a total of 10. Very close game. Right now we're tied at 31 apiece, so we'll move on to remaining favor tokens. The purple player has 1 and the green player has 2. Lastly, players lose 1 point for each open space in their window, so purple loses 2. The player with the highest victory point total is the winner, so in this case we have green with 33 and purple with 30, so green would be the winner. Ties are broken by the most points from private objectives, the most remaining favor tokens, then finally by reverse player order in the final round. I should note that throughout play, if a player's window is ever found to break any of the placement restrictions, that player must immediately remove dice from their window until all restrictions are obeyed. These dice are out of play, and any resulting in an open space will count against their score as normal. And there you have it. That is how you play Sagrada. If you have any comments or questions regarding any of the rules today, please feel free to drop them in the comments section below. If you've gotten any sort of value from this video whatsoever, please consider smashing that like button and subscribing, as it goes a long way. And lastly, you can find me over at Instagram and Twitter, links in the description below. But until next time, thanks for watching and happy gaming.